Mom, the nursing home already signed the paperwork. Your house belongs to us now. Those were the words my son said to me 19 days after we buried his father. 19 days. Not 19 months. Not 19 years. 19 days after I stood beside my husband's grave and promised I would take care of the home we had built together. I remember staring across the dining room table at Jason, trying to understand whether I had heard him correctly. The afternoon sunlight poured through the kitchen windows. The same windows my husband, Robert, had installed with his own hands 27 years ago. Everything looked familiar. Everything felt wrong. Vanessa sat beside my son, her manicured fingers resting on a thick stack of papers. She didn't look nervous. She looked prepared, like someone arriving at a business meeting, not someone speaking to her husband's 72-year-old mother. I don't understand, I said quietly. Vanessa slid the paperwork toward me. You'll be much happier there, Eleanor. There. Not home. Not your new residence. There. As if she were talking about a storage facility. Jason finally looked up. His eyes met mine for less than a second. Then he looked away. That hurt more than anything. When your own child can't hold your gaze, you already know the truth. The room fell silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant sound of a lawn mower somewhere down the street. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. The kind that suddenly become unforgettable when your life is about to split into two parts. Before and after. I'm not moving anywhere, I said. Vanessa smiled. Not warmly. Not kindly. Patiently. Like a teacher correcting a slow student. The nursing home has already accepted your application. Application? I had never applied. Jason cleared his throat. Mom, it's for your own good. For your own good. I think every betrayal in history has been wrapped inside those words. I stared at him. The little boy who used to run into my arms after nightmares. The teenager who cried when his first dog died. The young man who once promised he'd never let anything happen to me. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. I'm perfectly capable of living alone, I said. I drive. I cook. I pay my bills. Vanessa shrugged. You're getting older. The way she said older made it sound like a disease. I glanced around the room. My table, my house. Every inch of it carried Robert's fingerprints. The oak cabinet he built one summer. The fireplace we restored together. The family photos lining the hallway. 38 years of marriage lived inside those walls. And suddenly I understood something. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the house. The realization hit me like ice water. Jason shifted uncomfortably. Mom, this place is too much responsibility now. No, the house wasn't the responsibility. I was. And they wanted to get rid of both. A sharp knock interrupted the conversation. Vanessa stood immediately, almost too quickly, as if she had been waiting for it. When she opened the front door, two people walked inside. A woman in a navy blazer, and a man carrying a clipboard. My stomach tightened. The woman smiled professionally. Mrs. Brooks? We're here to help with your transition. Transition. Another polite word designed to hide an ugly truth. I looked at Jason, then at Vanessa, then back at the strangers standing in my home. Nobody had asked my permission. Nobody had consulted me. The decision had already been made. Or at least they thought it had. The woman handed me a folder. Inside were intake forms, medical records, housing agreements, and something else. A signature page. My eyes stopped on the bottom line. There was my name, Eleanor Brooks, signed in blue ink. My breath caught in my throat. I had never seen that page before. I had never signed it. But there it was. My signature. Or something pretending to be it. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Vanessa broke the silence. Everything's already arranged. She sounded proud, as if she had completed a complicated project. I slowly closed the folder. My hands felt strangely calm. The calm that comes right before a storm. The calm that arrives when shock becomes certainty. I looked at my son one last time. Did you do this? Jason swallowed. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence told me everything. An hour later, I sat inside a transport van heading toward a nursing home 40 miles away. Nobody from my family sat beside me. Nobody hugged me goodbye. Nobody said they loved me. As the van pulled away, I turned toward the window. That's when I saw something that made my heart stop. Two men were standing in my front yard. One carried a measuring wheel. The other held a real estate sign. And Vanessa was standing beside them, smiling. The house wasn't their future plan. The house was already for sale. And suddenly, I realized being sent away wasn't the betrayal. It was only the beginning. The nursing home was called Maple Grove Senior Living. The brochure made it look beautiful. Bright gardens, smiling residents, comfortable rooms. The kind of place families point to when they want to convince themselves they're doing the right thing. The reality felt different. The moment I stepped inside, a heavy smell of disinfectant hit me. Not unpleasant, just cold, institutional, temporary, like a place where people waited instead of lived. A young receptionist smiled at me as she typed something into her computer. "Welcome, Mrs. Brooks." I forced a polite smile. Behind me, the transport driver was already unloading my single suitcase. One suitcase. That was all Vanessa had allowed me to bring. 38 years in my home, reduced to one suitcase. I watched an aide wheel a resident past the front desk. An elderly man stared at the floor without speaking. Another woman sat beside a window, watching cars pass by outside. Nobody looked happy. Nobody looked excited about being there. They looked forgotten. The thought settled heavily in my chest. Was this what Jason saw when he looked at me now? Someone waiting to be put somewhere? Someone inconvenient? The receptionist handed me a packet. "Your son completed most of the paperwork already." My son. The words stung. Not because they were inaccurate, because they were. Jason had always been my son. I just wasn't sure anymore if he was still acting like one. A nurse escorted me down a long hallway lined with framed paintings and artificial plants. Everything was clean. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that settles over people after they've stopped expecting visitors. My room was small. One bed, one dresser, one chair, a narrow window overlooking a parking lot. I stood there for a long moment, trying to imagine Robert standing beside me, trying to imagine what he would say. He would have hated this. Not because of the room, because of the way I got here, because he would have recognized the betrayal immediately. Robert always saw through people faster than I did. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my suitcase. My hands froze. Half my things were missing. My photo albums. Gone. The framed picture from our 50th wedding anniversary. Gone. The wooden jewelry box Robert carved for me 30 years ago. Gone. Even the sweater that still carried traces of his cologne. Gone. Vanessa had packed exactly what she wanted me to have. Not what mattered to me. I felt something twist inside my chest. Not grief. Not yet. Humiliation. A different kind of pain. The pain of realizing someone had sorted through your life and decided what parts deserved to survive. That evening, dinner was served in a large dining room. I carried my tray to an empty table. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. Nobody spoke much. Forks scraped plates. Televisions murmured from a nearby lounge. Across from me sat a thin woman with silver hair. She studied me for a moment. "First day?" I nodded. She gave a small smile. "I cried for a week." Then she returned to eating. Nothing else. No explanation. No comfort. Just the truth. After dinner, I returned to my room. The sun had already disappeared. The parking lot lights glowed outside my window. I reached for my phone. No missed calls. No text messages. Nothing from Jason. Nothing from Vanessa. Nothing from anyone. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Then I turned it face down. Around 8 o'clock, a nurse knocked gently on my door. She introduced herself as Emily. She looked to be in her 30s. Kind eyes. Tired eyes. The kind of eyes that notice things. She reviewed my chart while asking routine questions. Then her expression changed slightly. Only for a second. But I noticed. "What is it?" I asked. Emily hesitated. "Nothing." I waited. Finally, she lowered her voice. "Mrs. Brooks, your records mention cognitive decline." I blinked. "What?" She glanced at the chart. "It says you've experienced memory issues and confusion." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Then anger began spreading through me. Slowly, coldly, like ice forming across a lake. I've never been diagnosed with memory problems. Emily looked uncomfortable. "I figured that." "You figured that?" She nodded. "You've been here 6 hours. You're sharper than half the people who write these evaluations." The room fell silent. Memory issues. Confusion. Suddenly pieces started sliding together. The forged signature. The rushed paperwork. The urgency. The nursing home. Someone had built a story about me, and they had put it in writing. Before I could ask another question, Emily glanced toward the hallway. Then she leaned closer. "So I'm going to ask something I probably shouldn't." My pulse quickened. "What?" She lowered her voice even further. "Are you actually supposed to be here?" For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The question hung between us. Heavy. Dangerous. Because for the first time since arriving, someone else had seen it too. Something wasn't right. That night sleep refused to come. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to distant footsteps. Doors opening. Doors closing. The sounds of strangers living parallel lives. Around midnight I got up and walked toward the nurse's station for a glass of water. As I approached the corner, I heard voices. 2 employees speaking quietly. Neither knew I was there. The son was really pushing to get her admitted fast. Yeah, I noticed. Most families take weeks. This one took 3 days. They laughed softly. Not cruelly. Just casually. Then one of them added something that made my blood run cold. Whatever was going on, they sure wanted that house cleared out quickly. I stopped walking. My heart began pounding. The house. Even strangers could see it. Even strangers could tell something was wrong. I quietly turned around and walked back to my room. For the first time since arriving, I wasn't thinking about grief. I wasn't thinking about loneliness. I wasn't even thinking about Robert. I was thinking about one thing. If Jason and Vanessa were willing to lie about my health, what else had they lied about? And how much time did I have before my home was gone forever? The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the pale beige walls, the narrow window, the unfamiliar dresser, and reality returned. Maple Grove, the nursing home, the place my son had sent me so he could take my house. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Outside, the parking lot lights were still glowing against the dark sky. Back home, I would have been making coffee by now. Robert would have been reading the newspaper. The dog we used to have would have been scratching at the back door. Small memories. Ordinary memories. The kind that suddenly become priceless once they're gone. I dressed slowly and headed toward breakfast. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed something strange. People smiled at me. Residents. Nurses. Even the receptionist. Everyone seemed kinder than my own family. That realization stayed with me all morning. After breakfast, I called Jason. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I left a message. Jason, we need to talk. Nothing emotional. Nothing dramatic. Just the truth. We needed to talk. Hours passed. No response. At lunch, I checked my phone again. Nothing. By dinner, still nothing. My own son had managed to arrange paperwork, move me 40 miles away, and start selling my house. But apparently answering a phone call was too much effort. That night, I called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I finally stopped trying. Not because I had given up. Because I was beginning to understand something. People who know they're innocent answer questions. People who are hiding something avoid them. The following afternoon, my phone buzzed. For a moment, I felt hopeful. Jason. Instead, it was Vanessa. A text message. Only one sentence. I read it twice. Then a third time. Focus on your bingo games. We've got everything handled. That was it. No greeting. No concern. No explanation. Just a reminder that she believed she had already won. I stared at the screen for a long time. The message wasn't just insulting. It was revealing. She wasn't talking to me like family. She was talking to me like an obstacle. Something standing between her and what she wanted. The house. The money. The future she had already imagined for herself. I deleted the message. Not because it didn't matter. Because I wanted to remember every word exactly as it was. That evening, Nurse Emily stopped by my room. She could tell something was bothering me. Bad day, she asked. I handed her my phone. She read the message. Her expression changed immediately. Wow. That single word said everything. I smiled faintly. That's one way to put it. Emily sat in the chair beside the window. You know, most families visit during the first week. I looked at her. Most families don't send their mothers away to steal their house. The words came out colder than I expected. Emily didn't argue. She didn't need to. A few moments later, she asked a question. Have you seen your admission file yet? I frowned. No. You should. The next morning, she helped me submit a request to review parts of my records. Apparently, residents had the right to access certain information. Something Jason and Vanessa probably never expected me to do. 3 days later, the file arrived. A thick folder. Far thicker than I expected. I carried it back to my room and began reading. The first pages were medical forms. Basic information. Emergency contacts. Medication history. Then I found the evaluation report. The one claiming memory problems. The one claiming confusion. The one suggesting I could no longer safely live alone. Every sentence made my stomach tighten. It described a woman I didn't recognize. Someone forgetful, dependent, disoriented. Someone who needed supervision. Someone who couldn't manage finances. Someone incapable of making important decisions. Someone who wasn't me. I kept reading. Then I reached the signature page. Again, my name sat neatly at the bottom. Eleanor Brooks. Perfectly placed. Perfectly false. I studied it carefully. The longer I looked, the more obvious it became. The letters were wrong. The spacing was wrong. Even the pressure of the pen looked different. Whoever forged it had copied the appearance, not the person. I turned another page, then another, and suddenly something caught my eye. Property disposition. My pulse quickened. I read the section again and again. The document indicated that arrangements had already been discussed regarding my residence. My residence. Not my home. My residence. Lawyers always say words matter. Whoever wrote this knew exactly what they were doing. My hands began shaking. Not from fear. From anger. Cold anger. The dangerous kind. The kind that waits. The kind that remembers. That afternoon, I carried the folder back to administration. A woman named Linda accepted it. As she organized the paperwork, a folded sheet partially slipped free. She frowned. That's odd. What is? She glanced down, then looked back at me. A property transfer document. My heart skipped. What kind of transfer? Linda scanned the page briefly. Then her eyebrows rose. For several seconds, she didn't speak. Finally, she looked directly at me. Mrs. Brooks. Her voice became noticeably quieter. It says here your house was sold for $1. The room seemed to tilt. $1. 38 years of mortgage payments. 38 years of memories. $1. I stared at her, certain I had misunderstood. But her expression told me I hadn't. Someone had already begun moving my home. Someone had already started transferring ownership. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just family betrayal anymore. This was a plan. A carefully prepared plan. And somewhere inside that plan was a mistake. Because people who get greedy always make one. I just had to find it. I couldn't stop thinking about those 3 words. $1. Not 1,000. Not 10,000. $1. The number followed me everywhere. Through breakfast. Through lunch. Through another sleepless night staring at the ceiling of my room at Maple Grove. Because the amount itself wasn't the point. The message was, someone wanted my house transferred as quickly as possible. And they wanted it done before I could stop them. The next morning, I called Jason again. Straight to voicemail. I wasn't surprised anymore. I left another message. Jason, I know something is wrong. Call me. Then I hung up. No anger. No accusations. Just a simple request. A son calling his mother back shouldn't be difficult. 3 more days passed. Nothing. Not a call. Not a text. Not even an excuse. It was strange. When he was a little boy, Jason used to call me 3 times a day from college. Now he acted as though I no longer existed. The silence told its own story. Meanwhile, something else kept bothering me. The house. If it had really been transferred, there had to be paperwork somewhere. Records. Signatures. Witnesses. People always leave footprints. The question was whether anyone would help me find them. A few days later, I was sitting alone in the common room when a staff member approached me. His name tag read David. He worked in maintenance. We had spoken only once before. He sat across from me. You okay? I smiled politely. As okay as someone can be when her family puts her in a nursing home. David nodded. No fake sympathy. Just understanding. I heard about that. I looked up. What exactly did you hear? He hesitated, then lowered his voice. The day you arrived, your son called 3 times. That got my attention immediately. 3 times. David nodded, not asking how you were doing. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What was he asking? David looked uncomfortable. He wanted to know if all the admission paperwork had been finalized. I didn't say anything. He continued. He sounded nervous. Not worried. Not emotional. Nervous. There was a difference. People worry about loved ones. People get nervous about transactions. That single detail stayed with me for the rest of the day, because it confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. Jason wasn't checking on me. He was checking on the process. I was paperwork. I was a requirement. I was the obstacle standing between him and the house. That evening, another surprise arrived. A visitor. For a second, I actually thought it might be Jason. Instead, I saw a familiar face standing in the lobby. Frank Donovan, my next-door neighbor. Or at least he had been my next-door neighbor before I was sent away. Frank was 68. A retired detective. Sharp eyes. Sharp mind. The kind of man who noticed details other people missed. The moment he saw me, his expression changed. Eleanor. I stood up. Frank. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then he shook his head slowly. I can't believe they did this. The words landed harder than I expected. Because until that moment, nobody had actually said it out loud. Everybody talked about transitions. Care plans. Senior living. Support. Frank called it exactly what it was. Something done to me. Not for me. We sat together near a window overlooking the parking lot. For nearly an hour we talked. At first about Robert. Then about the house. Then about Jason and Vanessa. Frank listened carefully. The way investigators do. Not interrupting. Not judging. Just collecting pieces. Finally he leaned back. Something's wrong. I laughed bitterly. That's the understatement of the year. No, he said quietly. I mean legally. That got my attention. Frank folded his arms. 3 days after you left, Vanessa hosted a barbecue. I stared at him. A barbecue? He nodded. In your backyard. For a moment I couldn't speak. The image alone felt like a punch to the chest. Robert's garden. My patio furniture. My home. And Vanessa throwing a party. Frank continued. There were people walking through the house. What people? Potential buyers. I felt all the air leave my lungs. Buyers. Not visitors. Not friends. Buyers. The house was already being shown. They weren't planning to sell it. They were actively selling it. Frank studied my face, then delivered another blow. Worse than that. I looked at him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. I heard something that bothered me. My pulse quickened. What? He opened a photo, then handed me the phone. It showed Vanessa standing in my driveway talking to a couple. Smiling. Laughing. Pointing toward the house. Beneath the image was a timestamp from 4 days earlier. I stared at it silently. Then Frank spoke. I was close enough to hear her. The room suddenly felt very quiet. What did she say? Frank's jaw tightened. She called it our new property. Our new property. Not Eleanor's home. Not Robert's house. Our new property. I felt something inside me change. Up until then, part of me had still been hoping for an explanation. A misunderstanding. A mistake. That hope died right there. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't concern. This was greed. Pure and simple. Frank took back his phone. Then he said something that made my heart start racing. That's not even the interesting part. I looked up. What do you mean? His expression darkened. The night before they moved you out. He paused. My security camera recorded something. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Because suddenly I knew. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally starting to surface. For the next 2 days, I thought about almost nothing except Frank's last sentence. The night before they moved you out, my security camera recorded something. I replayed those words over and over. While eating breakfast. While staring out the window. While lying awake long after midnight. Because deep down, I already knew something. People willing to forge signatures don't stop at one lie. They build entire chains of lies. The question wasn't whether Jason and Vanessa had done something wrong. The question was how much they had done. Frank returned on Saturday afternoon. This time, he brought a laptop. The moment I saw it tucked under his arm, my pulse quickened. He sat across from me in one of the small visitor rooms. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. The truth was sitting between us. Waiting. Frank opened the laptop. I copied the footage before the system automatically deleted it. I swallowed. How much did it record? Enough. The screen flickered to life. A timestamp appeared in the corner. 11:47 p.m. The night before I was taken to Maple Grove. My house sat quietly beneath the porch light. The same porch light Robert always insisted on keeping bright. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then movement appeared. A figure crossed the driveway. Vanessa. I immediately recognized her. She looked around before walking toward the front door. My front door. Not her front door. Mine. I watched silently. Frank paused the video. Look at her hand. I leaned closer. Vanessa was carrying a folder. A thick folder. The same type I'd seen on the dining room table the day they sent me away. My stomach tightened. Frank pressed play again. Vanessa entered the house. Several minutes passed. Then another figure appeared. Jason. My son. My chest felt heavy. Not because he was there. Because he clearly knew exactly what was happening. He wasn't being manipulated. He wasn't being tricked. He was participating. The footage continued. Nearly 40 minutes later, both of them stepped back outside. Vanessa appeared excited. Jason looked nervous. Then something happened that made my blood run cold. Vanessa pulled several sheets of paper from the folder. She placed them against the hood of her car and began writing. Again, and again, and again, the same signature. Over and over. Practicing. Perfecting. Copying. My signature. I stared at the screen, unable to look away. There it was. Not suspicion. Not theory. Not intuition. Proof. Actual proof. The woman had been rehearsing my name like an actress learning lines. Frank paused the footage. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt enormous. Finally, I whispered, "She forged it." Frank nodded. "Looks that way. Looks that way." The understatement almost made me laugh. Because there was more. We both knew it. Frank pressed play again. A few seconds later, Jason stepped beside her. He looked around nervously. Then he pointed toward the papers. The two exchanged several words. The camera didn't record sound. Only images. But body language speaks its own language. And theirs was obvious. They weren't discussing whether to do it. They were discussing how. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. That had happened weeks ago. Something else. The last excuse I had been making for Jason. The last hope that maybe he didn't understand what Vanessa was doing. That hope vanished forever. My son knew. My son helped. My son chose this. Frank closed the laptop halfway. "I have something else." I looked up. "What?" Instead of answering immediately, he opened another file. This one wasn't video. It was audio. My pulse jumped. Audio. Frank nodded. The camera system records sound. When movement is detected near the garage. My heart began pounding. Suddenly the room felt smaller. The air felt thinner. Frank clicked play. Static filled the speakers. Wind. A car door. Footsteps. Then voices. Vanessa's voice appeared first. Clear enough to recognize immediately. I felt my hands tighten around the armrests. The recording continued. A few sentences were difficult to understand. Then one line came through perfectly. Sharp. Cold. Unmistakable. "Once she's inside, the house is ours." The room went silent. I stared at the laptop. Certain I had heard correctly. Certain I wished I hadn't. Once she's inside, the house is ours. Not if she agrees. Not if she wants to. Not if it's best for her. Once she's inside. Like I was an obstacle. A problem. A piece of furniture that needed to be moved. I closed my eyes. For a brief moment, I thought about Robert. What he would have said. What he would have done. Then another realization struck me. The recording didn't just prove greed. It proved intent. They had planned everything before I ever arrived at Maple Grove. The forged signature. The false medical claims. The rushed admission. The property transfer. Every piece connected. Every piece pointed in the same direction. Frank finally broke the silence. "Eleanor, if this goes where I think it's going." I looked at him. They may have made a very serious mistake. For the first time in weeks, I felt something different. Not sadness. Not anger. Hope. Small. Dangerous. But real. Then Frank reached into his jacket and handed me a business card. An attorney's card. I looked down at the name. The moment I read it, my heart skipped. Because I recognized it immediately. It was the law firm Robert had used for years. The same firm that prepared his estate documents before he died. And suddenly a new question entered my mind. What if Robert had seen this possibility coming long before I ever did? What if he had left something behind? Something Jason and Vanessa didn't know existed. Something that could change everything. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like I could finally breathe. Not because my problems were over. Far from it. But because I finally had something stronger than suspicion. I had proof. The forged signature. The audio recording. The false medical claims. The rushed admission. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were starting to form a picture. And that picture wasn't flattering for Jason and Vanessa. 3 days after Frank showed me the recordings, I called the attorney whose card he had given me. His name was Michael Carter. I recognized the name immediately. Robert trusted him. And Robert trusted very few people. The appointment was scheduled for the following week. Frank drove me there himself. The law office sat inside a brick building downtown. Nothing flashy. Nothing impressive. Just solid. Like the kind of place built on reputation rather than appearances. As soon as Michael walked into the conference room, I knew he remembered me. "Eleanor." He shook my hand warmly. "I'm sorry about Robert." The mention of my husband's name still hurt. But this time, something else was mixed with the grief. Determination. We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing everything. The nursing home paperwork. The forged signatures. The audio recording. The property transfer documents. Michael listened carefully, occasionally taking notes, occasionally asking questions, never interrupting. When he finally leaned back in his chair, his expression had changed. He no longer looked sympathetic. He looked interested, very interested. Your son and daughter-in-law may have bigger problems than they realize. I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, he opened a file cabinet behind his desk. Several moments later, he returned carrying a thick folder. A familiar folder. One I had seen years ago. Robert's estate file. My hands immediately tightened. Michael placed it on the table. There's something I don't think Jason knows. I stared at the folder. What? Michael opened it carefully. Page after page appeared. Legal documents. Property records. Trust agreements. Then he stopped at a specific section. I noticed Robert's signature. And beneath it, my own. Memories flooded back. I vaguely remembered signing something years earlier. After Robert retired. After one of our friends lost his savings because of a family dispute. At the time, it had seemed unimportant. Now it suddenly felt very important. Michael tapped the page. This house was placed into a family trust. I frowned. I thought we still owned it. You do. He smiled slightly. But not in the way most people think. I listened carefully. Every word suddenly mattered. Michael explained that Robert had structured things differently. The house couldn't simply be transferred because someone wanted it transferred. Specific conditions had to be met. Specific protections existed. Protections Robert personally requested. A strange feeling settled over me. Almost as if my husband was still reaching across time trying to protect me. Michael turned another page. Then another. Finally he stopped. His finger rested on a paragraph highlighted years ago. Eleanor, I need you to read this. I lowered my eyes. At first, the legal language seemed complicated. Then the meaning became clear. Very clear. If any beneficiary attempted to manipulate, deceive, pressure, or unlawfully remove either trust holder in order to gain control of trust property, that beneficiary would immediately lose all inheritance rights. I read the paragraph twice. Then a third time, just to be certain. My heart began pounding. Slowly, steadily, because suddenly I understood exactly what I was looking at. Jason and Vanessa hadn't just targeted my house. They had triggered a trap. One Robert created years ago. A trap specifically designed for people motivated by greed. Michael folded his hands. Robert was very specific. I swallowed. He thought this might happen? Michael nodded. Not necessarily from Jason. The words landed heavily. But he believed that wealth changes people. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then I looked down at Robert's signature. Strong. Confident. Unmistakably his. Even now, he was protecting me. Even now. The realization nearly brought tears to my eyes. But there was another question. A more urgent one. If the trust protects the house. I looked up. Why is it still being sold? Michael's expression darkened. Because they either didn't read the documents. He paused. Or they assumed nobody would challenge them. Neither possibility surprised me. Vanessa always believed confidence was the same thing as intelligence. Michael closed the file, then delivered another shock. The closing date is scheduled for this Friday. I felt my stomach drop. Friday. Only 4 days away. For days before strangers could potentially believe they own my home. For days before decades of memories changed hands. For days before Robert's house became someone else's address. My pulse raced. Can we stop it? Michael didn't answer immediately. That worried me. Finally he nodded. Yes. Relief flooded through me. For approximately 2 seconds. Then he continued. But we'll have to move fast. The relief vanished. Because I could already hear Vanessa celebrating. I could already picture her walking through my kitchen telling buyers how wonderful the property was. Believing she had won. Believing everything was already hers. Michael gathered the documents. We're filing emergency motions tomorrow morning. I nodded. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. The game had changed. Jason and Vanessa just didn't know it yet. And as Frank drove me back to Maple Grove that afternoon, I looked out the window and thought about something Michael had said. People motivated by greed often make the same mistake. They rush. They get impatient. They stop checking for traps. Jason and Vanessa were rushing. The house closing was only days away. And that meant something else. Very soon, they were going to discover exactly what Robert had left behind. And when they did, everything they thought they had won was about to disappear. Friday arrived faster than I expected. For nearly a week, I had lived with a strange mixture of emotions. Fear, anger, hope, and something else. Anticipation. Because for the first time since Robert died, I wasn't the one being surprised anymore. Jason and Vanessa were. They just didn't know it yet. At 9 o'clock that morning, Frank picked me up from Maple Grove. Neither of us talked much during the drive. The legal paperwork had already been filed. The trust documents had been reviewed. The recordings had been secured. Everything was moving. Now all we could do was watch what happened. As we drove through my old neighborhood, my heart started beating faster. Nothing had changed. The same trees, the same sidewalks, the same mailboxes. Yet somehow everything felt different. Because I wasn't returning home. Not yet. I was returning as a witness. And that realization hurt more than I expected. When we turned onto my street, I immediately saw the signs. Cars lined both sides of the road. People walking toward the house. A large open house sign near the driveway. Vanessa hadn't wasted any time. My home looked like a product. Something displayed for sale. Something staged. Something stripped of its history. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Frank parked across the street. "You okay?" I nodded. Not because I was okay. Because I needed to be. We crossed the street together. As we approached, I could hear laughter. Conversation. The sounds of strangers imagining themselves living inside my memories. Each step felt heavier than the last. Then I saw Vanessa, standing near the front entrance. Smiling. Greeting visitors. Acting like the owner. The sight made my stomach tighten. Not because she looked happy. Because she looked confident. The confidence of someone who believes victory is already guaranteed. A few feet away stood Jason. He looked nervous. Much more nervous than his wife. His eyes kept moving. Watching people. Checking his phone. Looking toward the street. Almost like he was waiting for something. Or afraid of something. For the first time in weeks, our eyes met. He froze. The color drained from his face. Eleanor. Not mom. Not mother. Eleanor. Interesting. I noticed that immediately. The people nearby turned toward us. Suddenly the atmosphere shifted. The comfortable sales event became something else. Something uncertain. Vanessa forced a smile. "What are you doing here?" The question almost made me laugh. As though she were the one entitled to ask it. As though I needed permission to stand in front of my own house. Before I could answer, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. Then another. Then another. The first person to step out was Michael Carter, my attorney. The second was a court representative. The third carried a folder thick enough to make anyone nervous. Especially someone hiding something. I watched Vanessa's smile weaken. Just slightly. But enough. People who rely on confidence often fall apart the moment facts arrive. Michael walked directly toward us. Professional. Calm. Unhurried. The kind of calm that makes guilty people uncomfortable. Jason swallowed hard. Vanessa crossed her arms. "What is this?" Michael handed her a document. Then another. Then another. She skimmed the pages. At first, her expression showed annoyance. Then confusion. Then panic. Real panic. The kind that cannot be hidden. "What is this?" she repeated. Michael remained calm. "The sale is suspended." Silence. Pure silence. The words seemed to freeze everyone around us. Even the visitors stopped talking. "The sale is what?" Vanessa asked. "Suspended." "No." Her voice cracked. "No, that's impossible." Michael shook his head. "No, Mrs. Brooks. It's actually very possible." For several seconds, nobody moved. I could almost hear Vanessa trying to process what was happening. The open house. The buyers. The plans. The money. Everything suddenly hanging by a thread. Jason stepped forward. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. "What does this mean?" Michael looked directly at him. "It means ownership of this property is under legal dispute." Another silence. Then came the second blow. The one that hit even harder. Michael opened another folder. The trust agreement contains a disinheritance clause. I saw Jason blink. Once. Twice. Like his brain had stopped working. "What clause?" Michael's expression never changed. "The clause your father signed years ago." The mention of Robert's name landed like a hammer. People listened carefully now. Even strangers. Especially strangers. Because everyone understands what comes next when lawyers mention inheritance. Michael continued. "Any beneficiary found to have manipulated, pressured, deceived, or unlawfully removed a trust holder for personal financial gain forfeits inheritance rights." I watched Jason's face collapse. Not physically. Emotionally. The realization hit him all at once. The house wasn't the only thing at risk. Everything was. Every future expectation. Every dollar. Every plan. Gone. Vanessa immediately turned toward him. You said there wasn't anything like this. The words slipped out before she could stop herself. I noticed. So did everyone else. Jason looked stunned. I didn't know. How could you not know? The argument began right there. In front of potential buyers. In front of neighbors. In front of strangers. The same people Vanessa had hoped would admire her success. Now they were watching her fall apart. And for the first time since Robert's funeral, I felt something unexpected. Not revenge. Not satisfaction. Justice. Because lies can survive for a while. But eventually they have to stand in daylight. And daylight had finally arrived. But the biggest shock was still coming. Because Michael hadn't even opened the final folder yet. And inside that folder was something that would cost Jason far more than the house. As everyone stood frozen in my front yard, Michael opened the final folder. The one he had been carrying since the beginning. The one Jason couldn't stop staring at. The one Vanessa suddenly looked terrified of. I noticed both of them had stopped arguing. Because deep down, they already knew. Whatever was inside that folder was worse than everything that had come before. Michael removed several documents and handed copies to Jason and Vanessa. Neither spoke. Neither moved. They simply read. And as they read, their faces changed. First confusion. Then disbelief. Then panic. Real panic. The kind that can't be hidden. The kind that strips away every mask. Jason looked up first. His face had gone pale. What is this? Michael's answer was simple. Your father's final trust accounting. The silence returned. I could almost hear Jason's heart breaking. Because he already suspected what was coming. He just didn't want to hear it. Michael continued. The disinheritance clause has been triggered. There it was. The sentence that changed everything. Not maybe. Not possibly. Not eventually. Had been triggered. Past tense. Done. Final. Legally enforceable. Vanessa grabbed the papers from Jason's hands. No. Her voice sounded desperate. No, that's ridiculous. Michael didn't react. The evidence has already been reviewed. The recordings. The forged signatures. The fraudulent admission paperwork. The attempted property transfer. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. Vanessa's confidence disappeared completely. For weeks, she had acted like the smartest person in every room. Now she looked terrified. Because greed makes people feel powerful. Until consequences arrive. Jason lowered himself onto the porch step. The same porch where he used to sit after school waiting for me to come home. The same porch where Robert taught him how to throw a baseball. The same porch where we celebrated birthdays and holidays for decades. Now he sat there like a stranger. A stranger who finally understood what he had lost. Michael spoke again. Under the terms of the trust, you forfeit all inheritance rights. Jason looked up. All of it. His voice barely worked. Michael nodded. All of it. The words seemed to hit him physically. Because the house wasn't the only asset inside the trust. There were investments. Savings. Retirement funds. Property interests. Things Robert and I spent an entire lifetime building. Things Jason had expected to inherit someday. Not because he earned them. Because he assumed they would be there. Now they weren't. Gone. Not taken from him. Lost by his own choices. For several moments nobody spoke. Then Vanessa turned toward him. And exactly as I expected, she did what selfish people always do when things fall apart. She looked for someone else to blame. This is your fault. Jason stared at her. My fault. You told me everything was fine. The words came fast now. Sharp. Ugly. Public. You said your mother would never fight back. Jason stood up. You forged the signatures. You wanted the house. You pushed all of this. The argument exploded right there in front of everyone. Neighbors. Visitors. Potential buyers. The same audience Vanessa had hoped would witness her success. Instead, they watched her humiliation. And strangely enough, I felt no joy. Only clarity. Because the truth was finally visible. Not just to me. To everyone. Greed had destroyed them long. Before I ever walked into Maple Grove. This was simply the day the damage became public. A few minutes later, people began leaving. The open house ended. The buyers disappeared. The signs came down. The dream Jason and Vanessa built for themselves collapsed piece by piece. Eventually, only a handful of us remained. Frank, Michael, Jason, Vanessa, and me. Vanessa left first. Without another word. Without an apology. Without looking back. Jason remained. Standing alone in the driveway. For the first time since Robert's funeral, he looked like a little boy again. Lost. Ashamed. Broken. He walked slowly toward me, his eyes filled with tears. Mom, the word almost surprised me, because I hadn't heard it in a long time. Not really. Not sincerely. He struggled to continue. I'm sorry. I waited. He swallowed hard. I don't know what happened, but I did. Greed happened. Weakness happened. Bad decisions happened. I looked at him quietly. Then I finally spoke. You didn't lose the house today. He looked confused. I continued. You lost it the day you decided I was easier to remove than to love. The tears started falling immediately. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was telling him the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts more than punishment. A week later, I left Maple Grove. Not because someone rescued me. Because I had never belonged there in the first place. Frank drove me home. The real home. My home. As we pulled into the driveway, I felt emotions I couldn't describe. Relief. Gratitude. Sadness. Peace. All at once. The house looked exactly the same. The white porch. The flower beds. The oak tree Robert planted 20 years earlier. For a moment, it felt like he was still there. Waiting. Watching. Protecting. Frank reached into his pocket. Then smiled. I think this belongs to you. He placed something in my hand. An old brass key. My original house key. The same key Vanessa had taken from me the day they sent me away. I stared at it for several seconds. Then closed my fingers around it. The circle was complete. The thing taken from me at the beginning had returned at the end. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and stood quietly in the entryway. Home. Finally home. That night, I sat alone on the porch as the sun disappeared behind the trees. The same porch where this story had begun. The same porch where it ended. And as I watched the evening sky turn gold, I thought about everything that had happened. The nursing home, the lies, the betrayal, the greed, the humiliation. Then I thought about Robert, about the trust, about the protection he left behind. And I finally understood something. Jason and Vanessa believed the house was the prize. But the house was never the prize. It was the test. And they failed it. The moment they chose greed over family. The moment they chose property over love. The moment they forgot that a home is worth far more than the money it can bring. And that was the day they lost everything.